Hello, my name is Adam Shoemaker, and I'm rector at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Charleston. And I am happy to have with me two board members of Arm and Arm, Meghan Trezies, who is a board member and founder of the organization, and Pat Crane, who is vice chair of Arm and Arm and also founder and board member of the Low Country Faith Leadership Council. Is that right, Pat? Okay.
Yes, Faith Community Leadership Council. Yes.
Faith Community Leadership Council. Well, welcome to you both. Thank you for taking the time. And we'll be talking about Arm and Arm, about what the organization is about and how it got started. And so why don't we start right there? Meghan, how did Arm and Arm get started?
Well, of course, it began really for us on June 17th of 2015 with a mass shooting in Charleston. I think like so many Charlestonians, so many South Carolinians that day, I just really remember feeling so profoundly shocked. A shooting downtown in the mother of all AME churches, Mother Emanuel, and during a Bible study. It was just sort of the unthinkable. As a mother of young kids at the time, I couldn't stop thinking about Jennifer Pinckney and specifically how she had hid under her husband's desk with her daughter, protected only by one of those, those flimsy doorknob locks. And for me, a college classmate of mine also lost a child at Sandy Hook. He was a little 6-year-old boy named James. So when the shooting happened here, I felt completely unprepared and yet really compelled or pulled to do something. So our group met for the first time just a couple days after the shooting, and it was so raw. 80 people showed up. A bunch of them are still involved 5 years later, and it was really those folks who pulled us along. So that night we talked about our vulnerability and our fear and feeling helpless and angry. And we really just started to ask ourselves some questions. Why has nothing substantial been done since Sandy Hook? What are the real obstacles to getting something done in South Carolina? Is there an opportunity to approach reform and gun violence prevention kind of in a new, fresh way that works for our state? So, and what might that look like? And for me, I grew up in a gun-owning family, so we also talked a lot about how to reach out to other gun owners so that their voices are heard and incorporated, and gun ownership isn't shamed at the same time. So the question for us really became, how do we leave the vitriol behind and find substantial ways to make our state safer, particularly for our kids, since gun violence is the second leading cause of death in kids in South Carolina. That statistic kind of takes my breath away, and it's really why our group keeps going.
Well, and Pat, how did you begin to get involved in the organization?
Actually, by accident, and actually through Mayor Riley. I had one of those, I call it divine intervention moments in fall of 1918. No, 19, good God, no, 2018. Anyway, no, I'm not that, I'm old, but not that old. Anyway, and so that led me to meet with people from Arm and Arm. And my focus at the time was, where are our faith leaders in raising a voice against the crisis, atrocities, tragedies of these gun violence episodes? And that's kind of was where my focus was. And then I was led into Arm and Arm, and that's how we had that event that you were at, when Reverend Shank came up and spoke to the group about gun violence. And that's how I got involved.
And how have a lot of faith communities begun to get involved and support the work of Arm and Arm since its founding?
Yes, this Low Country Faith Community Leadership Council that I'm talking about, the concept was that if we could get a group of multi-denominational churches, synagogues, any kind of faith organization, if we could get them together around the same table and ask them to take gun violence and gun safety as a priority, that would be a beginning of giving the faith community a voice at the table on gun violence. And I'm going to go back to Meghan in this, because this happened before I came, but actually recognized the need for the faith community to be involved from the very beginning with Stand Up Sunday. Meghan, I wasn't here at the time. Why don't you share Stand Up Sunday?
Yeah, Stand Up Sunday was really, sort of our beginning answer to that question of where are faith leaders, where's the faith community, how are they standing up? And so we created an event called Stand Up Sunday, where we had congregations from across the state standing up to talk about gun violence on one day of the year. And we had a couple thousand congregations participate that first year. It was really exciting, but what Pat is talking about is really, sort of our approach to digging a little deeper and trying to get congregations to really engage in preventing gun violence on a deeper level. And so it's really evolved since that beginning.
I will just note that we're in between bishops here in the Episcopal Diocese of South Carolina, but there is a national network called Bishops Against Gun Violence that many Episcopal bishops are involved in. And Skip Adams, our most recent bishop, was very active in, and so he was supportive of encouraging Episcopal churches in our diocese to participate in Stand Up Sunday when he was here. And we'll be electing a new bishop soon, and I certainly hope that our new bishop will support that cause as well. Meghan, why don't you talk a little bit about sort of what's been going on recently and where things stand in trying to tackle this issue at the state level?
Well, I think like a lot of gun violence prevention groups, we really sort of began our efforts with policy and legislation. And when we first began, we knew that we would have to kind of create this enormous coalition of mayors and police chiefs and business influencers and medical professionals and a bunch of South Carolinians to really put pressure on lawmakers to pass that reform. So right now, one of the big key things that we're very focused on is, number one, passing positive preventative legislation. And of course, universal background checks is number one on that list. We have about 30 years of data that show how much that would help. It's imperfect data, but it's important to show how much that would help prevent gun violence. And then the other thing we're very focused on is stopping open carry. It's a policy that is continually brought back to the forefront in Columbia every year, and we're very focused on pushing that back. But another thing that we know, in terms of low-hanging fruit and really making a difference in terms of safety in our state, we know we have to do something about guns stolen out of cars and suicide and accidents. And so we're in the process of sort of at the tail end of creating a multimedia statewide gun safety campaign that really includes, gun owners are involved in it so that kids and teens are safer. And we're preventing gun theft out of unlocked cars, which is a huge issue, especially here in the Low Country, and suicide. So we started working with law enforcement, and we're beginning to, we can share a video with you, but we're about to roll it out this year, and we're really excited about that. But one of the things, as Pat was talking about what we're doing with the faith groups, a big piece of what we're doing, some of what we do is very much in the moment, and how do we respond to policy and legislation that's moving? But part of it is also, how can we actively shift the divide? How do we shift this conversation about gun ownership and reform? Because we've become so hyper partisan that nothing happens. And so one way that we're kind of addressing that is we're holding gun ownership summits where we get feedback from gun owners on specific pieces of policy, and then bring that up to Columbia and have real meaty discussions about what's possible in terms of policy. And then I'm sure Pat will want to talk about, how we're addressing shifting that conversation with our faith communities as well. So we're actively
Yes.
yeah. we're actively focused on, both informing and educating, actively reaching out and trying to make gun safety just a part of our state culture, and then also shift the conversation towards something that is much more productive.
It's really amazing how much social capital and power that faith communities have in the Low Country. I recently had an interview with steering committee members of Stamp Out Hate, which is the organization trying to get hate crime legislation passed in South Carolina. And they too were talking to me about how they are trying to mobilize faith communities, because faith communities are communities that have a real voice in Columbia, and an influence on state legislators. I wonder if you could say anything about how things are in the legislature as it currently stands. I mean, does Arm in Arm have a good deal of support, or is there opposition that is needing to get worked through? I mean, where do things stand there?
Well, yes. I mean, it's really the answer. There is a tremendous amount of opposition, I need to be truthful and straightforward about that. And yet there's also a huge amount of possibility and potential there as well. I mean, I think lawmakers, especially, when we go and talk to them individually, are very open to talking about gun safety. They really want to hear about, how is it that this is the second leading cause of death of kids in our state. And so there's, it's really both. There is tremendous potential. We just finished our election accountability project, where we surveyed lawmakers, candidates, on their stance on gun issues, and then highly, promoted that and publicized that. And we had kind of a team of volunteers reaching out. And what we found is that when people reach out, lawmakers really respond. They hear stories, they hear concerns from constituents, and that makes a really big difference to our efforts. And so sort of building that foundation is incredibly important in terms of what we're doing. So yes, there are a bunch of challenges, but we feel like we have this moral obligation to keep going and to keep building this foundation for, moving the issue in this next year.
I assume the challenges revolve around legislators who want to protect Second Amendment rights. Is that essentially yeah?
It is. I mean, that, there's a big sort of push-pull where, it's easy to fall into the trap of talking about gun reform or Second Amendment rights. And really the starting point where we go in and talk to lawmakers is, look, we can do both. We can support lawful gun ownership, and we can do things to really make our state safer. And it doesn't have to be, it's a false choice. It doesn't have to be an either or conversation. And what we're finding is that a lot of gun owners really want to be heard. A lot of lawmakers want to hear from gun owners who feel strongly about gun safety reform. And so we're kind of really bridging that conversation, and we feel that's where the possibility is. That's where the richness is in the conversation, and where we really can move forward and make something happen in Columbia.
You all have a lobbyist in Columbia? Is there somebody who's officially working up there for Arm in Arm?
We talk a lot about the possibility of that. And what we found is that creating a substantial grassroots voice has been more productive for us than having a lobbyist so far. I mean, we also talk about doing some fundraising and sending a lobbyist up there to be doing work on our behalf. And, we may in fact decide to do that. For right now, we don't. But we do have a legislative committee that is very active out there, that is constantly doing outreach. We really have our ear to the ground. And, one big thing that we do is with our email or with our email list, we keep people informed of everything that's happening on the ground in Colombia. So a lot of the work that a lobbyist might do, we're already doing. And so we send out action alerts to volunteers so that they can call and make their voices heard. And we really, we work hard to educate people on what's happening, where it is in the process, what that means for us, and what the possibility is.
And you have chapters and church involvement across the state?
Well, we don't have organized chapters across the state, but we certainly have members, and we have this network, like I said, of mayors and police chiefs and other community organizations that stretch across the state. One of the things that we really need to do in the next year is double our outreach so that, when we're reaching out to lawmakers, it has much more impact. So we're going to be looking to our current membership to be reaching out across the state and pulling friends in to the work that we're doing. I mean, that's one of our big goals for the next year.
Did you want to add to that, Pat?
Well, actually, what I'd like to add to, if I could, is going back to the Faith Council, because I'd like to share with you the fact that this group did meet, and it's a multi-denominational. But last winter, we did our first Bible study. The group organized a Bible study over 6 weeks, and it was the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Bible study that Reverend Shank had told us about. And what happened was, and this is a basis of Arm in Arm, we have to change the narrative. We have to have the conversations. We have to build consensus of agreement on something needs to be done, and then what are we going to do about it? And what I have, and I will send to you after this interview today, I have a summary of comments from that. And that went 6 weeks and ended, thankfully, just before everything shut down. But for 6 weeks, we had originally 75 people attended the first one, and no less than 60 over the 6 weeks, every week on a Wednesday night, multi-denominational churches, okay? And they loved it. So successful was that our second Bible study initiative, and this is for multi-denominational churches. This is not one church. This is a group of churches, AME churches, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Lutheran. That's the beauty of this thing. And so we're doing a second one starting January of 2021, Zoom, of course, with some workout sessions. Only this focus is going to be on racism, because with the council over the summertime, you couldn't deny the impact of systemic racism as a conversation. So this summer we did, and I'll send this to you as well, I have a summary of this. We did have a book club study on a wonderful book called Trouble I've Seen by a Reverend Drew Hart. It's awesome. And that was 9 chapters, and we all took turns leading that. And it's a very powerful, small book, but boy, it makes it very easy to be able to have, because in our book club, we had white Christian churches participating, and we had AME churches participating. And it was a wonderful opportunity to really test out, can you have these difficult conversations, and how do you do that? And it worked beautifully. So I'm mentioning this book study starting in January. This is open to St. Stephen's. This will be open to any church that wants to participate. So what I will do, Father Adam, I will email you the survey of the last Bible study comments from people who attended. And I will send you the summary of the book club sessions and what came out of that. And so if you'd like, you could follow up and share that with your congregation, and we'd be delighted to have them. It's going to be Zoom, so we'd be delighted to have them participate.
Oh, that's great. I've just been named co-chair of a new committee for the Episcopal Diocese on racial justice and reconciliation. We've only had a couple of meetings, but it's a wonderful, diverse cross-section of the Episcopal Church in the Low Country and a little beyond that. And I'd love to share that information with them as well. So
it might be helpful. Reverend Bill Coyne was on our original meeting too. Okay, he's been attending our meetings, and he was there in the beginning. Though he was right there in the beginning when we created this group. So as I say, I will send you a short version of the book club experience talking about the racism, systemic racism in the Christian churches, and I have a longer version. I'll send you the longer version. Okay.
Okay.
Because it has a lot of material that you might be able to share with your committee.
Well, and your mention of Zoom is a great segue to my next question. For a lot of the interviews that I've had over the last few months, I've asked those I've interviewed, how has this crazy, strange year of 2020 impacted your work. How has Arm in Arm had to continue forward in light of where we are? You want to take that, Meghan?
Well, I'll begin, and I know Pat's going to want to chime in on it. But I think, one of the beauties of Arm in Arm is that a lot of what we do is really about conversation. The ability to interact, to have open conversation is incredibly important in everything that we do. And so that, in that sense, our work really hasn't stopped. It's gotten maybe a little more intimate. Our gun ownership summits where, we're reaching out to gun owners and talking about universal background checks, a universal background check bill specifically, we go line by line through the bill, and that's been happening on Zoom. And we're going to continue to hold those. And the beauty of it is that we can do it around the state, fairly quickly and easily. So in that way, we've sort of adjusted some of what we're doing. We also have information sessions on Zoom where we're, letting people know what's coming up, what our goals are, how we're going to get there. And so the conversation really hasn't stopped during this time. Pat, do you want to chime in on that one too?
Well, I will also share another part of Arm in Arm that we have that we created a year ago this past fall. We created a subgroup, so it's not subgroup, but another group called the Community Advisory Board. And I think some of your parishioners have been very much involved in that. But anyway, and so what the pandemic Zoom world has done is we have had Zoom cab meetings, and that's an expanded group than beyond the board, okay? And their role and function is to advise us. It's just what the word says, advise us. And Mayor Riley was kind enough to be our honorary chairman of that, which we kicked off last November. So Zoom has enabled us to keep in touch with a variety of people in the community and to share these talks and keep them up to date and have them give us feedback, which is extremely important. And then for the faith community, it's been a godsend because, and that's what was so powerful about the book study thing, because in the Zoom setting, if the people who participate have built up trust, then the conversation goes very deep, and it did go very deep with respect, but with honesty. So Zoom, I'm not sure in a in-person environment that we might have been able to be as honest, multi-denominational, respectful, but passionate. And so it's that's the kind of silver lining, so to speak, of a horrible situation right now we're all in. But God does provide, and He does. And so Zoom has provided us with an opportunity to address things regularly, consistently, and come to begin that dynamic of changing the narrative, having difficult conversations in a safe environment. What will be interesting will be last year's Bible study, which was so successful, was in person. This year, it's going to have to be by Zoom, unless we all get vaccinated the day after New Year's, but it's going to have to be in Zoom. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how that impacts the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been a lot of lessons for churches and nonprofits and even businesses about ways to do things a little differently based on the learnings we've had over the last year. And I'm sure there will be some of that will continue on even when we're all happily on the other side of this pandemic. You did mention that we've had St. Stephen's parishioners involved in Arm in Arm. Certainly I know that Sally Dool has been very involved. We have certainly done Stand-Up Sunday at our church. We have hosted an Arm in Arm gathering at least once while I've been at St. Stephen's, where we had Dr. Manning from Mother Emanuel come and speak at our church. Moving forward, could you speak a little bit about ways that folks in our congregation could continue to be involved and supportive of Arm in Arm and your mission moving forward?
Well, one way I've been talking about, I know I sound like a salesman on this, but honestly, it is an exciting expansion in this faith community. It really is, because It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to really see it take life and have some impact. So on a broad scheme, volunteering on our projects, like when we had the Open Carry campaign, which Meghan put together this winter. And we had volunteers go out to their friends in the community and get them to sign letters, to go to the legislature through Meghan and talk about why we were opposed to the Open Carry. So any kind of volunteering, contacting Arm in Arm through Meghan or anyone else, seriously, there are so many different projects that they could volunteer for. We're a small army right now. We would like to expand the number of people in our army. And then the other obvious one is the faith initiative, okay? Because the more, last thing was focused just on gun violence. And the more people we get to care about it, to express about it, to talk about it, to share their experience, the more comfortable the environment's going to be for talking truth and talking change. So I would say volunteer. And obviously, we are always grateful for any kind of financial support that helps us do the work. If you can't give the time, which is understandable, and the conditions because of the pandemic health, as the expression goes, no money, no mission. So therefore, we would never be opposed to having a financial support as showing your support.
Do you have things to add to that, Meghan?
Well, I think Pat beautifully described why, Zoom has kind of enhanced the ability to communicate for us and to be really truthful and to share. And I would just mention two other ways that volunteers can be involved. And that's, we've had a number of people host their own small group discussions where we kind of facilitate it, but the host really, sort of sets the agenda or the tone. And we just support and provide information and facilitate conversation. So that's one thing, substantial thing that people can do to help. And then also, if we have hunters and gun owners in the congregation, to have them participate in one of our gun ownership summits. I mean, the feedback is incredibly valuable in terms of our outreach to lawmakers and really underscoring the belief that there's a substantial number of gun owners who really deeply care about safety and who care about reform and who want to see South Carolina do something substantial to make it safer for our families and for our children. So I would just say that, we can be very creative in ways that people can help and kind of join and be a part of what we're doing.
And I assume—
I just want to jump in. I'm
sure.
sorry, Father.
No,
I
go
just
ahead.
want to jump in what Meghan just said, if I may, on the Zoom things. What we do have, and Sally has participated in this, what we are trying to do is to have Zoom meeting friends for friends, not for fundraising, for friends, and have us friends to invite their friends in. And we do give, Meghan and Peter do give a presentation, very impactful, very helpful. So if any of your congregants would like to contact Zoom, and offer to just host a Zoom meeting of their friends just to share the message. That's another way of us expanding the support, the emotional, passionate, committed support that we need in order to make the real changes.
And I assume opportunities for volunteering, contacts, and ways to give can all be found on your website?
It can, yes.
Yeah.
All of those things.
And that website is, can you just say it for those listening in?
Yes, it's very simple. It's arminarmsc.org.
Okay, great.
Yes, and one thing that I would love to share with you after our conversation is over. I think we had mentioned that we've worked with a creative group who pro bono created a series of short spots for us, and I'd love to share that with you so that you can share that with your congregation. It's 30-second and 1-minute spots that basically give an overview of our efforts and really why we need to come together for safety in South Carolina.
Absolutely. I believe this is definitely a moment, a political moment in the country when we need to be finding ways to come together and reach across the aisle, so to speak, and form bonds so that we can come up with practical solutions to care for everybody in our community. So thank you both for what you're doing, and thank you for your work, and thank you for the time you've made to have this conversation with me today. Hope you have a very Merry Christmas.
Thank
Same
you.
to you, Fran.
Same to you.
Thank you.
I'll be back, friends, with another one of these Rector's Corners soon. In the meantime, be safe, be well, and wear your mask, friends. Take care. Bye.